Welcome, everybody. Kerry Tracy is the creator of Elementary STEM Con and Beyond, developer of Bone Bridge STEM Challenges, and owner of Feel Good Teaching. Kerry, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, a question you probably get asked a lot as a STEM challenge trainer, teacher, and all goodness of science and tech. What did you want to be when you were growing up?
So the first thing I can remember actually wanting to be, and actually like saying out loud, was I wanted to be a digger. And what I meant by that, had seen on Sesame Street archaeologists and at work, and so to me that I couldn't remember that word. So I walked around saying I wanted to be a digger for quite some time. I never ended up doing that, but sometime around third grade, I can remember deciding that I wanted to be the one with the chalk. So I'm dating myself a little bit. So we were using chalkboards back when I was a student.
I didn't use that.
Not too much. No, mostly whiteboards and smart boards and things like that now. But yeah, so I wanted to be the one with the chalk as of third grade. I thought that was the most amazing thing. And so that's when I first remember wanting to be a teacher, and that's what I became first.
I wanted to be a digger. So we went from the person with the shovel to the person with the chalk.
Exactly.
You have quite a background in teaching. Can you tell us a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into all the cool stuff you're doing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So I taught in the classroom, public schools for 10 years, grades 2 through 8. I got a master's degree in design based learning. And that sort of really shifted my approach to teaching. I had always been sort of a hands on kind of teacher, but with design based learning, it sort of opened me up a little bit more to considering productive failure, especially as part of the teaching process, and focusing a little bit more. To me, that's kind of my current passion point, is really focusing in on, we teach students a lot of skills on how to be successful. Like a lot of things we actually teach them to do, like circle this and highlight that and draw yourself a picture, and all these specific doable skills for success. And then when it comes to failure, there really aren't too many here's what you do to actually process failure and get through it. And so that's kind of where my head is at right now. But I think STEM in general and design kind of process, engineering design process, or just design process, sort of goes in line with that. The idea of doing iterations to get to where you're going, right? And then to not take failure personally. It's just data and how to use that. So that sort of shifted the way that I was teaching. And then after I left teaching, I sort of went into what I call the kind of the civilian world. And I did some project management, trying to find ways to use my teaching skills in a different capacity, because I had gotten really burned out. And now that sort of shifted into creating my own business, which is Feel Good Teaching. And within that business, I create teaching resources and also teacher professional developments that are mostly conducted virtually, even before the pandemic, because just a little bit more accessible, easier for teachers to be able to, access when they want.
Yeah, I want to back up a little bit. First of all, I like the productive failure, because growing up, it was like, you're number one. You have to succeed. They don't tell you when you fail, it doesn't change who you are as a person. And here's how you can use it productively. I have a friend of mine who's a coach who always says, fail as much as you can, as long as you're failing forward and you're making
Right.
progress. So tell us a little bit more about productive failure. And then I want to get into design based learning, because you live in
Sure.
that world, but people listening might not know what that is.
Got it. Okay. So productive failure first. So the reason I'm obsessed with that is because, like you, when I was growing up, I was really focused on achievement. I had a very fixed mindset, and like school was pretty easy for me for many, many years. And then when I hit 10th grade algebra 2 honors, I I had my first, like what I call my first stunning failure.
Did
And
you get a B plus? Is that what happened?
no, I got a C in my first semester. I had never gotten a C even on a test before this year. I don't think. I can't remember having even gotten a C. And then the second semester I flat out failed, because it ruined me. Like, it completely sent me into an identity crisis at like the tender age of 16. And I just think that if we aren't preparing our students early and often to fail, it sets them up for this, like you said, it rocks your world of who you think you are, and you associate it too much with your self-worth and your value and who you are, your personality. So for me, I remember just sobbing in class. It was so uncool. I remember sobbing and thinking, like, I don't even know who I am if I'm not the smart girl, and I'm clearly not the smart girl. Like, I remember thinking those
Wow.
things. And so when I got into design based learning, I didn't really think too much about it, philosophically, or, you know, I didn't really dive too deep into it. I just, the next year I retook it with an easier teacher, like on purpose. I managed to get into an easier class because I figured I'll find a way to pass it because I have to pass.
Because if I'm not the
And
smart
then
girl, who am I?
right. And then I'll move forward and, whatever. I didn't realize it for the important event that it was until years down the road. But then when you go into teaching, a lot of what you do is a little bit habitual about what you learned or your experiences as a student. So you bring a lot of things with you that are good, but you bring a lot of things with you that are suboptimal as well. So I think we have in our culture sort of an achievement epidemic. We fixate and focus so much on the end product and not nearly enough on learning as a process. And there are a lot of factors that go into that. There's a lot of, obviously, there's pressure from standardized testing that I think is counterproductive in a lot of ways. We have parents who are also in the business of shielding their kids from any unpleasant emotions. Like, we have some parents who are helicopter parents or bulldozer parents who just love their children so much they never want them to have any unpleasant emotion. And I
Good luck with
understand.
that.
Right, exactly. And so what ends up happening is if you try to shield them from it, when the world comes to their doorstep, which it will, it comes for us all eventually, then the kids aren't prepared to deal with it, right? They don't know what they should do, how they should process failure, both emotionally, and then I think because you think you have to do that part first. If you have negative emotional reactions or failure, which many people do, that's natural, right? It's a normal thing. Nobody likes to fail. Nobody likes to get frustrated. But you have to learn to deal with that emotional piece of it in order to be able to get to the analytical piece. Okay, now what can I learn from it? What can I do differently and see if I can learn something that I can apply in a different way moving forward. I think I've gotten myself off on a tangent, so
That's
I'm not
okay. I love
sure
these
what I
tangents.
was supposed to talk about next.
That's okay, wasn't it? I think it was Henry Ford. I could have the person wrong, but where he said something like, "I haven't failed. I've just found 100 ways that this didn't work."
10,000 ways, and it
Ten
was
thousand ways it didn't
Edison.
work. Was it Edison? Okay.
Yeah, Edison's team with the light bulb. Yeah, that's one of my favorite quotes.
Okay.
Yeah, so
So
I
say
haven't
it the
failed.
correct way because I just failed at it, which is good because I'm failing forward.
That's right, failing forward. So
Um,
I might not have it word for word, but paraphrase, it's I have not failed. I found 10,000 ways that don't work.
which is
It's something like that.
And it's
Yeah.
funny, I was thinking back to when I was in school, there was a girl who came into class who was all like, "I get straight A's. I've got nothing that's like really the kind you want to pinch when they're bragging." And the teacher said, "Oh, well, maybe you should take some harder classes because how are you growing if all you are is if you're getting it perfect, you might not be trying hard enough." And at the time I was like, "Huh."
Yeah. Yeah, I love that concept. If you haven't if and that's part of the thing with STEM challenges too. You alluded that we'll kind of talk about that later, but challenge is right in the title. And so it's meant sometimes you're supposed to fail at them. And that's
Oh,
kind of part of the process. And if you're approaching STEM challenges all the time as just sort of like a fun activity and students are always successful at it, then there are things that as teachers it would be helpful to do to adjust your criteria and constraints or your materials in order to push it up. Because if you aren't actually challenging them, and it's not a STEM easy, it's a STEM challenge. So we do need to look at that and not be scared of it, or not sort of move away from it for time constraints or whatever else might be going on for you. For me, since I had so many issues with failure, I refer to myself as a fragile perfect, which is a term that comes from Angela Duckworth's book Grit.
ah,
um,
we were. I have not read it yet, but I have a friend of mine who's told me 5 times. She's like, "You have to read this book. You have to read this." You like positive psychology, you have to read this book. So now you're the second person.
Listen, you're gonna have to pick it up. I got mine from well, first I got it from the library, but then I ended up buying it because I knew I wanted to like highlight
Yeah.
sections and mark them off and just own it.
And I know what I'm reading this weekend.
Yes, yeah, it's really great. And so in it she talks about from like I can't remember, she's a college professor that she was telling the story, but she says, these students come in, these bright and wonderful students come in at midterms and they're struggling,
Yeah.
and it becomes clear to her that they know how to succeed but they don't know how to fail.
Yeah.
And it causes so much distress when that first failure hits you. The later it hits you in life, the more stressful and you know emotionally entangled you sort of are with it, which is why I really love to normalize the idea of failure as, this is, we know as adults now that there are no success stories that aren't riddled with failure. Like there are no, Bill Gates had failures, Oprah Winfrey had failure. Everybody has
Hey,
failures.
Elon Musk, I think he went nearly bankrupt a couple of times on, on his
Exactly.
so,
Exactly. So we know it's required, right? In order to be successful, you have to be willing to fail. And then you have to actually know what to do with the failures. So that's I'm completely obsessed with the notion of it now, because I think, yeah, I'll say I'm a late bloomer. So when I say I'm a fragile perfect, I usually actually say I'm a recovering
okay,
fragile perfect.
16 is not late blooming to have that crisis. It's a shame that it happened, but that's still pretty young.
No, I mean, yes, it's young, but it's not young enough. I mean, you shouldn't exit elementary school without knowing how to fail, I don't think.
Okay,
I
interesting.
mean, that's the world I would like to see anyway.
Yeah. So let's go there. You're talking about STEM challenges. Basically, Reader's Digest version for somebody who might not know what they are. What are STEM challenges? And you've already talked a little bit about why they're important, but a little more about what they're for.
Sure. So STEM challenges there's quite a bit of variety, but so I'll tell you about the sort of my flavor of it, and then I'll sort of tell you some other ideas on the other end of it. But basically what I like to do is take a challenge you can do with mostly very cheap materials or things you have around the house, like cardboard. I always say like clean trash, like things like food packaging that isn't, gnarly and nasty.
Disgusting.
It's like you have like a little foil left over from something, all that.
Unless you're going into the
And
petri dish, then it's okay.
and then so an example like of a classic challenge that most people have seen before would be, an index card tower. So you get 20 index cards, you have to make the tallest tower possible in X amount of minutes. Would be a really simplified version of a STEM challenge. People do like toothpick bridges and things like that. But the idea is you have a problem
Mhm.
that has to be solved, and you have criteria and constraints.
Okay.
So in a tower challenge, and this to me also, the criteria and constraints and materials, those are sort of the most important levers to adjust
Mhm.
for different age groups to make it more difficult. Because you can have kindergartners do this challenge, and you could have adults do this challenge, and there's something to be gained by any group doing it, but they shouldn't have the same criteria, constraints, and materials. Otherwise, you're not really adjusting it enough for the age group to make it appropriate. So, for kindergarten, for example, you would probably give them more time in
Mhm.
their constraints. So, their constraints would be a little bit more flexible in terms of time. You would probably give them much more tape. Whereas an adult, maybe you don't give them any tape.
But no
And
glue.
no, well, I don't do glue with my STEM challenges for a number of reasons, but one of them is when you're in the classroom, glue takes time to dry.
Okay.
And I just don't, hot glue works all right with older age groups that you aren't too worried about getting burned. But
Yeah.
in general, I choose tape over glue whenever it works because of the time constraints you have and the mass constraints too, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But and then for your older students, then you would do things, maybe it's not just a height thing. So like for kindergartners, I'd still maybe give them 20 index cards, but I give them a bunch of tape too and more time.
Mhm.
Whereas as I'm getting into older age groups, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, maybe above, maybe instead of saying we want the tallest tower possible in that amount of time, I say, okay, I want to tie this in with maybe my ancient civilizations lessons. And so I want them to have to build either around a river or on an uneven surface.
Mhm.
So I might put like two textbooks down or something on a desk surface, and they have to have the bases touching the book and the desk underneath, like on the other side of it. So it's straddling, either straddle a river or something like that. So there's a lot of room for creativity. And what you're doing is you're looking to adjust not only the difficulty to try to make sure it's challenging, but also thinking ahead to your content standards, your academic content standards that you might want to tie in. Because part of the value of design based learning in general is that you're not only doing a hands on activity, but you're providing sort of a physical context in the classroom to attach lessons that are coming
It's deeper than just
afterward.
reading it in a book and memorizing. You actually have tactical, some world experience to be able to apply it.
Right. And it's wonderful because it creates student buy in, right, and engagement to the lessons that are coming, particularly if they know that their second iteration of this challenge is coming maybe at the end of the unit. So all the in between is, oh, maybe I pay attention because I want to build a better tower when we
Yeah.
do it again at the end, and this is going to apply. So you've given them a reason to care beyond, what might already be interesting to them, or in some cases, we know might not be interesting to them. Not everybody is into ancient civilizations. Not everybody is into the math lesson
Not
that day.
everybody wants to be a digger.
Not everyone wants to be a digger.
I don't know why.
I don't either. It looks fascinating to me.
So, talk a little bit about what STEM is not, because I think people slap that label onto a lot of things.
Yeah, they sure do. Okay, so one of the things I was saying when I first started with STEM challenges is saying when we talk about STEM in general, it's more than just like a hands-on challenge like I described. It involves robotics or coding or all any number of things that kind of fall under that umbrella. When talking about STEM challenges, which again was kind of my flavor, the thing that I really like best because it's cheap, it's easy to do, and there's so much room for flexibility in making it difficult. The issue sometimes is when people look at it from the outside and they see, oh, this looks like a cute bridge or this looks like a cute tower. It makes a great photograph for Pinterest or for sharing on the school websites. What sometimes happens is it gets treated as a craft
Mm,
instead of a STEM challenge. And so some of the big differences, because like looking at it, it can look kind of similar, right? From the outside, looking at a picture of it, you might not be able to tell right away. And so I think what's happening is a lot of people who maybe shouldn't be putting out resources that are called STEM challenges or called, even have the STEM label on it are doing so. And I don't think it's malicious intent or anything for the most part. I just think they don't fully know. So with a craft, you would usually have step by step directions given to you. There's not a lot of problem solving involved.
okay.
So you kind of like, what the end result is supposed to look like. You have the directions.
Yeah.
And for the most part, everybody's looks the same at the end,
Like if
right?
I'm making a recipe, if I follow the recipe to the letter, it's going to look like that at the end.
Right. It should. Fingers crossed, right?
Unless
I know I've
you failed.
right, right. Whereas with the STEM challenge, you would not show them ahead of time a picture of the end result because it's open ended. It's an open ended problem. So, one of the things that I'll tell teachers to look for to sort of, do a quality check for themselves as to the quality of their STEM challenge, if at the end you have designs that look roughly the same from
Mm,
your students, there's a problem. And that problem might be, it could come from a few different things. First of all, if you show them a picture ahead of time, like, oh, here's an example, you don't have to build it this way, but here's an example. Well, like if I said to you right now, imagine an apple, a bright red, juicy apple in your mind, right? Like you see that picture, you've got that visual. And then I say, now think of a fruit, but not an apple. Don't make an apple. Don't think of an apple. It's so hard to release the apple from your brain, right?
right.
So, what happens is with a lot of students, they'll see, especially the high achievers or your current fragile perfects,
They're going to Google what is this challenge? What is it supposed to look like?
if they see a picture, they're largely going to replicate it.
Yeah.
Almost always. So that could be one of the problems. Another issue that might be there is if you're giving them directions, that's not a STEM challenge. There should never be step by step directions. It should just have criteria and constraints. So criteria for a tower challenge would be you want to build the tallest tower possible, and it has to be freestanding. So it can't be like propped up against a wall, or you can't be like holding it, whatever. Constraints might be, so I think like criteria as requirements, and then constraints are your limitations. So you might say you've got 20 minutes to build, you can only use the materials provided to you. Um, and maybe you might have a constraint around the base. So you might say you may not tape the base down, or you might say the area of the base cannot exceed
Hmm.
whatever, 100 square centimeters or whatever it is. And that's sort of a way to build in a math standard, but also a way for you as the teacher to make sure you have enough room
Yeah.
to have all the designs stored in
So if
some
there's
way.
like a crash and burn where it just doesn't go well for the student, is it something, do they say, what did I do wrong? And you tell them, or do they say, what did I do wrong? And you offer tools for, or ask questions so they can figure it out themselves?
So that is a great question. So what happens is like as the teacher, sorry, I'm so excited. I keep like stuttering through my words. When the students are building,
Mhm.
as the teacher, I'm facilitating. So I'm just sort of walking around and observing. I might stop in and ask some questions, but I'm looking for a couple of things. I am looking to see, do I see any students who are like really struggling and starting? You can see frustration, right? You know your students. And so, what I would do in that moment, first of all, I never touch their designs. I have to keep my hands behind my back. Like I clasp my elbows behind my back so that I can remind myself I'm not going to touch their designs. Their designs are theirs.
Yeah.
And what I have in my head as my mantra is, you're not helping them by helping them. And I have to say that, and I think a lot of teachers do, because we don't like to see our kids struggle. It's unpleasant, right?
Yeah.
But if you know your goal is for them to be productive adults who can handle struggle and failure, this is part of the practice.
Yeah.
So I don't just ignore it, but what I'll do is I'll go and I'll say, hey, what's going on? Like, tell me what you've done so far. Tell me what you're up to. And they'll start describing it. And if they're frustrated and they haven't said, I might ask a question like, oh, what's working well, what's not so far? What have you tried? I ask a lot of questions, kind of like thinking of myself almost as I'm a curious observer.
Yeah.
I don't have any answers for them, but the thing that I will give them support on is working through the frustration and the failure. The thing I will not support them on is, hey, have you tried taping this to that? Or hey, would you try folding this up? I'm not solving the problem for them. It's really important that you don't do that, because you'll have some students who will just wait it out until you tell them the answers. And
Mm,
there aren't answers, quote unquote answers. There are so many different ways to approach it. So I'm not worried about that. The other thing I like to keep in mind is I don't care if they have a tall tower at the end of the challenge,
yeah.
because this is not product. This is process. So process over product.
Mhm.
All I care about is that they are making, like you said, failing forward.
Yeah.
All I care about is at the end, I know we're going to walk around. I'm going to give them time to present. They're going to have an opportunity to see their peers' designs, to ask questions, to answer questions. They're not being graded on their tower. Any sort of like grade that I would take would be based on their analysis of their designs and their peers' designs. So it doesn't matter if your tower fails. It really
What did
doesn't.
you learn along the way? What did you gain from
Exactly.
it? Yeah. And it
Exactly. And
sounds like
so
it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and so the thing that in my head is the way that I'm supporting them is just really working through any of the emotional entanglement that you might have if you're frustrated and failing, and like learning the tools to like take a step back and what can you do? Steps 1, 2, 3. What are things you could, like I said at the beginning of this conversation, the strategies, the things like highlight, circle, whatever. And we
Yeah.
talk about, okay, take a step back and just recognize, just decide, just realize I'm frustrated. What do I need to do next? And we'll actually like have a discussion around this and even have like a 3 steps. Here are the 3 things I do. I take a step back and I take a deep breath.
Yeah.
That's step 1. Step 2 could be like walking around silently without disrupting other groups, walking around the classroom to just observe. Just observe what you're seeing from other groups and
Yeah.
all that. Step 3, if you have a new idea or you're ready to keep working, then you do that. If you are not yet, then you simply document like everything you've done so far. So it's like almost like a process flow chart.
Mhm.
First, I did this, I tried that, it didn't work. I tried this, I tried that, it didn't work. Because that documentation is what you can use in a clearer frame of mind, maybe the next day, maybe not even today, to actually go through and sort of analyze, okay, what can I get from? So it's fine if they fail. What's not fine for me is if they shut down completely and aren't doing something. They have to always be doing something. So even if it's just documenting, this
They
is what
have
I've
to have
already
grit.
done.
They can't give up.
Right. Not fully give up, but even then, I still give them the out of, after they've gone, usually what happens is after they've gone around and they've observed,
Yeah.
there's usually a new idea, and then they move forward with that. One of the rules that I would give to students is you can't do a straight copy of something somebody else is doing. You always have to throw in something different, like
Yeah.
take it at a different angle. And when they present later, they need to give credit to the original group. Like I walked around and I saw this
Wow.
group, because what happens is like kids get really, and adults too, like I'm this way. If somebody copies me and
Yeah.
doesn't give me credit, it infuriates me.
Yeah.
But so this is what I realized, like kids would get really frustrated because it's like, well, he's looking at what we're doing and he's copying. And, it's like, but that's what we do in science, right? We don't just start from scratch with everything. We build upon others' work,
Yeah. And
but
then it
we
becomes
credit them.
yeah, and it becomes kind of a collaboration. So in addition to teaching them skills and knowledge, it's critical thinking, it's emotional intelligence. They're
Yes.
learning how to be ethical, good people in the process. And it's so interesting as a coach. When people come to me and say, "Oh, just tell me what to do," no, I'm not going to tell you. So a lot of the same rules apply as far as you're not going to give them the answer. You're going to give them the tools so they can figure it out. And
Yes.
that's the beautiful thing. So let's talk a little bit about STEMCon and excuse me, elementary STEMCon and beyond. Where did that come from and what's happening with that?
Yeah. So last year, I created this virtual conference, and last year it was called Elementary STEMCon. And what we had done is I was really eager to make accessible to more teachers all kinds of great STEM content. And for me, like I'm very comfortable presenting and talking about STEM challenges, but robotics is not my wheelhouse.
Mhm.
Green screen animation. Now, I like these things, but I don't consider myself qualified to present. And obviously, even if you were doing a conference, you would never be the only presenter. So I set out looking for other educators that were passionate about their topics and skilled and ready to present. And I was very excited to get all of these people, pull them in, create, your passion topic sessions. And then we wanted to make a virtual conference with that content really accessible
Mhm.
for teachers everywhere. And so we keep the price really low. So our price point is right around $40. It goes up a little bit before the end of registration. It's a little bit cheaper during early, but basically it's right around the $40 range, which is um,
Ridiculously cheap for a conference and everything that you're getting.
yes.
That's
And this is
because
this is
it's
a
good
4 day.
teachers in mind.
Exactly, because a lot of budget allocation does not go to professional development, and unfortunately, and we know there are a lot of budget constraints for everywhere right now. And so what ends up happening is teachers often have to purchase their own professional development if they're interested. And for the budget that does exist in schools, it's almost entirely, in my experience. So I'll just say my personal experience. It was almost entirely allocated to English language arts or math, not a whole lot of STEM or science. I can't really remember any in my 10 years. That was maybe a couple things here and there provided by the district, but certainly not to the extent of what we're doing, which is 4 days that are packed full of content. And it's a hybrid conference. So some of the sessions are pre recorded
Mhm.
and we do some sessions live. And it's a really nice mix. And we give everybody access to all of the content. All of our attendees get access to everything. Even the live sessions end up being recorded and then placed on the site to view later for a full year. They have access so they can go back and visit things if they were, really loved a session, but it also gives them sort of that flexibility to kind of pick up and not feel like they need to compress, 4 full days of like full-time attention to this conference, because nobody can really nobody can really do that. And this is in April. So this is April 16th through the 19th. But again, if those dates don't work for you, it's totally fine because you have everything for a year. We have a 50, it's actually over $50 of STEM resources everybody gets. It's donated from the presenters who have been really, really generous. So actually, what you get in donated prizes exceeds the cost of the conference. We're really proud of that. And we had last year teachers from 24 countries
Wow.
came to our conference, which was really amazing because we didn't really even think about that. I was thinking I really want it to be accessible. I know a lot of teachers have talked to me being in rural communities that they don't have access to a lot of like high quality conferences because they're in person, and
Yeah.
it requires travel, and that's so much more expensive. So we decided, well, we definitely need to do this again. This needs to be annual.
Yeah.
But this year we added the and beyond. So now it's elementary STEMCon and beyond. And the reason that we added that is we had requests from secondary teachers
Mhm.
to add some content for them because they wanted a conference like this as well. So we've added more secondary content. We've added more STEAM. So adding that art
Mhm.
into science, technology, engineering, and math. We have a lot of sessions for that now. We had that integrated a little, both of these things, secondary and STEAM. And special education is another kind of area of focus for us when we were expanding this year. We had those pieces last year a little bit, but every year kind of going forward, we're going to be looking at, what are some areas, some niche areas that we want to expand in and create even more content for moving forward. So we are super excited to be doing it all over again, and we have really exciting sessions. I'm very excited about not just our pre-recorded, but our live sessions are really exciting. I think we get so much from the panels, especially.
And you had some really cool panelists coming.
Yeah, so we're very excited. We have
Go
Steve
ahead, geek out.
Spangler. I know, I'm so
Now
excited.
say it again.
So we have Steve Spangler, who in the elementary world, he's kind of, I mean, he's pretty famous for most of us. So he's on Ellen. Ellen called him like America's science teacher. He's coming and he's going to be a panelist on virtual science fair takeaways. So there was a group of us who worked together on a virtual science fair. It was organized by Dr. Heather Kaiser. She created it in her school district, and then the rest of us, including Steve, on the panel, were judges. And so we kind of like had some takeaways about like what worked well, what didn't, because like you said, it's iterative. We have things that worked really well and some things that we do differently next time. And so we're really excited to share that. We have a panel on diverse and inclusive reads. So talking to elementary STEM teachers and to some extent secondary, because I believe a quality picture book works for all grades. I really do. I think there are ways to connect I love picture books now as an adult, but also when I was teaching seventh grade, there were some picture books that I could bring in and use for some of our lessons. So I just wouldn't count them out, even if you're a
If
secondary
I have
teacher.
trouble understanding something, I'm going to look for an elementary school book on the subject with pictures just to wrap my head around a concept if I don't get it. So I see
Yeah.
value in picture books as an adult.
Absolutely. And so with this panel, like one of the things we want to look at is like helping teachers like take a critical look at whatever, a lot of teachers have classroom libraries.
Mhm.
So just giving them ideas of different books that they might want to include or add into their own libraries to make them more diverse and inclusive. And we have some amazing guests on that panel, including Vanessa Brantley Newton, who her illustrations are just gorgeous. If you aren't familiar with her, look her up. She's amazing. Melissa Sweet, who wrote Balloons Over Broadway. And we have Dr. Arlene Simon, and she I don't know where she finds time for all of these different titles, but she's a biomedical engineer. She's an author. She's an inventor. She's an entrepreneur. We also have Dr. Yasmin Daniels, and she is just the same way. She has all these different titles. She's an analytical chemist. She's a professor, an author, and a youth mentor. We just have, and that's just a small sample. Those are just a couple of the sessions. We have over 45 sessions between the pre-recorded and the live. So for us last year, I think the thing that we really took away from it, because it happened in April, so we were about a month into the pandemic then,
Mm.
and we weren't sure if it was the right time to do a professional development, but we went forward with it anyway because it was ready and we're just like, let's go for it. And it was really re energizing. There's something really special about being around truly passionate educators.
Yeah, and connecting at a time when nobody can connect in person to find a way
Yeah. It
to.
created a really nice community. And so, I know it's hard to predict even a couple weeks into the future now, but I feel like I am definitely going to be ready in April for that feeling again,
Yeah.
being really connected and just getting really, because teaching is a really, really hard job, even like in the before times. It
Yeah.
was a really, really hard job. What teachers are doing right now, what is being asked of them right now,
Yeah.
is so beyond anything I can even comprehend, knowing that I was burned out in the before times.
Yeah.
So being able to connect and find things to be excited about in teaching right now, I
Yeah.
think is sorely needed. And so I'm really looking forward to doing it all over.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions for you. I could talk to you all
Sure.
day because I find this stuff fascinating. But it's so interesting to me, and without getting on a soapbox, but the number of women that you mentioned at this conference, because I don't know what your experience is, but growing up, I wanted to take wood shop and metal shop. I wanted to take biology class, and I was conveniently talked out of it. But you're a woman, you, or actually not even a woman, you're a girl. Girls take sewing and cooking, and and so I ended up getting strong armed to give up a woodworking class to take a sewing class, which I hated.
Oh
And
no.
to this day, there was one girl who's brave enough to take that class, and she said how much fun it was. And I was like, man, I wish I could have been like her. And I was determined, I'm going to be that girl from now on, like whenever I want to do something. So it was, you're steered towards English and away from science. I don't see that as much now. Do you feel that that is changing significantly?
For sure. I mean, I think my own experience in school, I didn't feel pushed away from anything I wanted to do. Although my favorite subjects in school were English and science. Until I got into high school. Once I got into high school, I realized I wasn't going to be in a STEM profession. Didn't think that was
Mhm.
really where my brain worked best. But I also wonder if the ways that in general we sort of do sometimes steer girls into girl activities and boys into boy activities. I think there's much more awareness of that now than there has ever been. And certainly, I think most people are making really concerted efforts to make sure that we don't steer anybody out of a STEM profession, especially thinking forward that a lot of the jobs that our students are going to be stepping into in the next, 10, 20, 30 years, they don't even exist right now. A lot of the jobs they're going to be doing do not exist right now, which is like mind-blowing
Yeah.
thing to think about, right? So I do think that that is changing, but I do also believe that because there are so much history and so much habit that has been ingrained for so long, that we do really still need to be conscious of making sure that we are encouraging everybody to explore all of their talents and skills. And particularly when it comes to STEM, I know that at our conference, we actually have far more female presenters than male. And that's partially because I'm looking for it, but it's also because we have a mix of presenters. So some of our presenters are like master teachers,
Mhm.
some of them are subject matter experts, some are specifically authors, and some are STEM professionals, and some, like Dr. Simon and Dr. Daniels, are sort of everything all at once. Um, but in general, teachers, particularly at the elementary level, tend to be more female than male.
Mhm.
So, but even with that, we all still need to be, I always like to say, we're immersed in the same culture that our students are. So
Yeah.
when it comes to things like norms or habits or feelings about productive failure or just failure in general, we are subject to the same culture that our students are. And so we have to have time and space to be reflective on our practice, which is something teachers are not often given.
Yeah.
There's hardly time to do anything, let alone like sit and reflect
Yeah.
and like consider, what they might, what language choices. Like for me, one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is the language choices that you make are so important. And so one of the things, an example of that would be when we were doing multiple iterations of a challenge. So like being able to try the same STEM challenge more than one time, I would almost always say in the second or the third chance, how are we going to try to make it better? And which is there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
But I started thinking about um, one of the things that I hear a lot of teachers saying, and something that I think about a lot too, is it's sometimes hard to help students be creative and innovative. Like how do you build that if it's not already there, like innate? And
Yeah.
but I do think it is innate. I think it's something that actually ends up getting stifled a little bit. And
Yeah.
so then it's like, well, how do we unstifle it, right? How do
Right.
we
How do we
encourage it?
set it free?
Exactly. So, and I realized that language, that's a simple language choice of saying make it better, puts in pressure on the end product.
Mm,
that I don't necessarily want to be there. If my goal is I want students sometimes to just try something just to try it, even if it's not going to be successful.
yeah.
Right. I think that's important for creativity, right? And risk taking, innovation, those things all kind of go hand in hand. And so a simple word choice that make it better. How will we make it better? Maybe that's not what I want to say.
Yeah.
Maybe I want to say, what do you want to try next? What do you think the outcome will be? Or, I don't even necessarily want to ask the next question, but it's something that I'm an overthinker. So it's something that
I have guessed that.
it's got its pros and its cons for sure. But I think things like that, like where you can get some quiet time, which for a lot of teachers doesn't happen until the summer, and even then, for a lot of teachers, they'll teach summer school or they'll pick up a second job or a third job in
Yeah.
order to supplement their income. So they might not even have the reflection time then. But it's something I'd like to see a little bit more, hopefully, um, in the kinds of things like where you have staff meetings and things like that, where it's just you need that quiet time to sit and reflect and realize even just something that small can
Yeah.
make a big difference. So I think a lot of the things we're bringing into the conference will give an opportunity for that. Like I mentioned earlier, that diverse and inclusive reads. There, a lot of times you buy books, you put them in your library, and you don't, necessarily think how representative is this library of the population that I'm teaching and the world in general? Because even if your population, you don't want to only have books in your classroom that are for one population, even if it like matches really well to the group you're teaching,
Yeah.
because the world is bigger than that. And so let's let's make our books more representative of what's out there in the world. And then the reason that we have a book panel at
Mhm.
our conference is because a lot of teachers are developing their STEM challenges to tie in
Yeah.
with picture books, because there's always a problem in a picture book, right? There's always a problem to be solved. So they're often, if you just think about Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Yeah.
We've got beds, we've got chairs, right? We can do STEM challenges around, creating the perfect bed, creating the perfect chair that's going to hold a certain amount of weight, or, maybe, have some sort of aesthetic, requirement to it as well. Um, I don't even remember what your original question was. This is what happens when you get me talking.
Hey, I don't want to end this without talking a little bit about feel good teaching, because we started there.
Hmm.
Talk a little bit about the resources, and I believe that that website, along with the STEMCon, they can go to the same place to learn more. Is that
Yeah. So if you're interested in the conference, I would say go to elementarystemcon.com.
okay?
And Feel Good Teaching is sort of the umbrella
Hmm.
company. And so there's even like a little pop up on there that would lead you back to the conference site as well. But it also has blog posts, it has videos. I have a YouTube channel, and a lot of those videos are embedded within the blog posts. And so they're sort of like shorter bites on direct lessons that you can do, like actual STEM challenges. Here's how to do it in your classroom. Here are some things to look out for. Here are the materials you need, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there are also smaller sort of professional development videos. So things around growth mindset, things around teaching productive
Mhm.
failure, even just things like, should you have a budget, like a student budget. Some like a lot of times when teachers are doing materials, they'll say the student has $2 to spend, two fake dollars, right? And pipe cleaners cost this, and toothpicks cost that. I have some different feelings about that. So basically, it's anything I have an opinion on. I might have made a video about at this point, and you can get yourself into a rabbit hole if you want to nerd out. But yeah,
I
and
watch
then
some of the videos. I think they're fascinating because it also ties into a resource. Like, here's how you do it, and then the resource is very moderately priced. And I know a lot of teachers, they don't have a big budget, or they're spending the money themselves. So to be able to not have to create everything from scratch and go someplace to have some ready-made ideas, that's huge.
it is so huge. I do think that before I left teaching, if that sort of market existed the way it does today, so there are a lot of teachers selling on a site called Teachers Pay Teachers. and they have set their lesson plans there. And so I do have a shop there, and then I have it on my own website as well. I think if that had existed when I was still teaching, then I might not have burned out quite so fast. And so I do think the market is so wonderful now that there are, teachers who really get into their niche and get really good at something. And so I would have loved the opportunity to just be like, oh, let me go pick up this lesson plan for history this day. Let me go pick up this. And then I can devote my time and energy to some, this other piece of the puzzle, because there's just your work is never done as a teacher.
Yeah. Okay. So tell us one more time, STEM, Con, and Beyond, the website.
Oh, the website elementarystemcon.com,
Hey, Kerry
and
Tracy.
that'll get you there.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.